A homeless black man saves a child from bullies. He is shocked to find out who the boy's father is. The winter storm howled through the empty streets of downtown, where a lone figure huddled beneath a snow-covered bridge. Malik pulled his threadbare coat tighter, watching his breath form crystals in the frigid air. Through the swirling snow, he spotted a small shape moving unsteadily across the icy park, a child no more than 8, pursued by shadowy figures. Despite the biting cold numbing his limbs, Malik rose. The same park where he lost everything 2 years ago, where another child's cry went unanswered. Not this time. This time he would answer the call that fate had placed before him. Hey, beautiful souls, before we dive into this touching story, take a moment to share where you're watching from in the comments and hit that like button. Your support means the world to us. 10 years ago, Malik Thompson was far from the man who now sought shelter beneath city bridges. A respected structural engineer with a corner office, he had designed some of the city's most prominent buildings. His life was a testament to the American dream: a loving wife, Sarah, a brilliant daughter, Maya, and a home in the suburbs. But success, he learned, was as fragile as the winter ice that now coated the streets. The case seemed straightforward: funds missing from a major construction project, evidence pointing to the lead engineer. James West, an ambitious young prosecutor, saw it as his ticket to prominence. Despite Malik's protests of innocence, a paper trail and a colleague's testimony sealed his fate. His reputation shattered, his savings depleted by legal fees, Malik watched his life crumble like a house of cards. The tragedy struck one snowy evening, eerily similar to tonight. Sarah and Maya, driving to visit him in jail, hit a patch of black ice. The accident report read no survivors. Malik, allowed to attend the funeral in handcuffs, died inside that day. When evidence later surfaced suggesting his innocence, it was too late. The real culprits had vanished and the system had moved on. Now at 48, his hair grayed prematurely and his eyes carrying the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights, Malik survived on the streets. Yet beneath his weathered exterior, traces of the educated, compassionate man remained. He shared his meager food with other homeless souls, fixed broken toys for street children, and maintained a small journal filled with engineering sketches and memories of his lost family. James West's rise continued unabated. Now a prominent attorney at 42, his reputation for being tough on crime earned him both admirers and enemies, but behind closed doors he battled his own demons. His marriage crumbled under the weight of his obsession with work, leaving him sole custodian of his 8-year-old son, Ethan. Ethan, a quiet boy with gentle eyes and an old soul, struggled with high-functioning autism. His world, already challenging to navigate, shattered when his mother died in a car accident 2 years ago. He found solace in art, filling sketchbooks with drawings of the family he yearned for. His father's long hours left him lonely, seeking connection in a world that often felt too loud, too fast, too harsh. The winter that brought these three souls together was the coldest in decades. As temperatures plummeted and snow blanketed the city, the divide between the haves and have-nots grew starker. Malik watched from the shadows as people hurried past, clutching designer coats and looking through him as if he were invisible. In his pocket he kept a worn photo of his family and a newspaper clipping about his case, reminders of a life that seemed increasingly like a distant dream. Little did any of them know that fate was about to weave their lives together in ways that would challenge everything they thought they knew about justice, redemption, and the true meaning of family. The city itself seemed to mirror the stark contrasts in their lives. Downtown's gleaming skyscrapers, some of which Malik had designed, cast long shadows over the alleyways where he now sought shelter. The prestigious law firm where James worked sat just blocks from the park where Malik spent his days, their paths crossing without recognition, separated by invisible but impenetrable social barriers. Winter had descended with unprecedented ferocity. Record-breaking temperatures forced the homeless community into increasingly desperate situations. The local shelter, already overcrowded, couldn't accommodate everyone. Despite his own hardships, Malik helped organize an informal support network among the homeless, sharing information about warm spots and food sources. His engineering mind never stopped working, and he'd even devised makeshift insulation systems for those sleeping rough. The community's reaction to their homeless population was sharply divided. Some residents, led by business owners, pressured the city council to implement hostile architecture and anti-loitering laws. Others, including a small but vocal group of social activists, fought for more shelters and services. The tension simmered beneath the surface of every neighborhood meeting, every city council session. James's world couldn't have been more different. His modernist house in the affluent Heights neighborhood offered every comfort, yet felt emptier with each passing day. His son Ethan's art teacher had recently expressed concern about the boy's drawings, all depicting lonely figures in snow, searching for something. The school counselor suggested more father-son time, but James's high-profile cases kept him working late into the night. The garage where James would eventually offer Malik a job stood at the intersection of these different worlds. Rick's Auto Shop, a family-owned business for 3 generations, operated on the principles of second chances. Rick himself had overcome addiction in his youth and made a point of hiring people trying to turn their lives around. His shop served both luxury cars and run-down vehicles, treating each customer with equal respect. In the neighborhood surrounding the park, an undercurrent of prejudice ran deep. The recent influx of homeless people had sparked heated debates about safety and property values. Local business owners complained about decreased foot traffic. Police patrols increased, and unofficial curfews were enforced through subtle but persistent harassment. Ethan's school sat adjacent to the park, and he often watched through the classroom window as people hurried past the huddled figures on benches. His teacher noticed he'd started drawing these scenes, detailed sketches capturing the humanity his young eyes recognized in those society chose to ignore. One figure appeared repeatedly in his artwork, a tall man in a worn coat, standing like a silent guardian near the park's edge. The stage was set for a collision of worlds. As December's grip tightened and temperatures continued to fall, the city's social fabric stretched to its breaking point. Against this backdrop of mounting tension and bitter cold, 3 lives were about to intersect in ways that would challenge their beliefs, force them to confront their past, and ultimately redefine their understanding of family and redemption. The day that changed everything began like any other winter morning. Ethan sat alone on a park bench after school, waiting for his father, who was running late again. His small fingers, red from cold, clutched a sketchbook as he tried to capture the way snow settled on bare branches. The other children had long since gone home, leaving the park eerily quiet except for the whisper of falling snow. From his usual spot beneath the oak tree, Malik noticed something was wrong before it happened. 3 teenage boys had been circling the park, their postures predatory, their laughter carrying a sharp edge. When they spotted Ethan isolated and vulnerable, they moved with practiced coordination. "Hey, rich boy," the tallest one called out, snatching Ethan's sketchbook. "What's a spoiled brat like you doing in our park?" The others closed ranks, forming a tight circle around the bench. Ethan's hands began to shake, overwhelmed by their sudden proximity. His autism made confrontation especially terrifying, and he could feel panic rising in his chest. "Please," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Give it back." The leader flipped through the sketchbook, his sneer deepening. "Look at this," he mocked, holding up Ethan's detailed drawings. "Think you're better than us because you can draw pretty pictures." He started tearing pages out, letting them fall into the snow. Tears froze on Ethan's cheeks as he watched his artwork being destroyed. The sound of ripping paper seemed to echo across the empty park. When he tried to stand, one of the boys shoved him back down. Malik had seen enough. Something in Ethan's desperate expression reminded him of Maya, how she used to look when overwhelmed by the world's cruelty. Rising from his spot, he moved with quiet purpose toward the group. "That's enough." His voice, though calm, carried the weight of authority that years of hardship hadn't erased. The teenagers turned, startled by his sudden appearance. "Mind your own business, old man," the leader spat, but Malik could see uncertainty creeping into their bravado. He stepped closer, drawing himself up to his full height. "I said that's enough." Each word was measured, deliberate. "Return the boy's book and leave. Now." For a moment, the tension crackled like static in the frozen air. The leader's fingers tightened on the sketchbook, his pride warring with his instinct for self-preservation. Malik didn't move, didn't break eye contact. Finally, the boy threw the sketchbook down. "Whatever. Kid's not worth our time anyway." They backed away, trying to maintain their tough facade before turning and hurrying off. Malik knelt beside Ethan, who was still trembling. "You're safe now," he said softly, helping gather the scattered drawings. "I won't let 'em hurt you." As he collected the pages, his breath caught one sketch showed a familiar scene, a car accident in the snow, hauntingly similar to the one that had claimed his own family. The sound of expensive leather shoes crunching on snow broke the moment. James West arrived, breathless and worried, his designer coat flapping in the winter wind. He froze at the sight, his son, tears still fresh on his face, kneeling in the snow beside a homeless man. Ethan James rushed forward, instinctively pulling his son away from Malik. "What happened? Are you hurt?" His eyes darted suspiciously between Malik and the scattered drawings. "Dad, he helped me." Ethan's voice quivered. Some boys were. They were his words dissolved into quiet sobs. Malik stood slowly, conscious of how his appearance might seem threatening to a concerned father. "Your son was being bullied," he explained calmly. "I intervened before things got worse." James's expression flickered between gratitude and distrust. He recognized Malik from the park, one of the homeless people he'd argued should be removed during recent city council meetings. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Thank you," James said stiffly, his arm still protectively around Ethan. "We appreciate your assistance." He reached for his wallet, but Malik raised a hand to stop him. "I don't want your money, Mr. West." The use of his name made James start. "I just couldn't stand by and watch a child being hurt." Ethan pulled away from his father, gathering his partially destroyed sketchbook. "He saved my drawings too, Dad." "Well, some of them." His small fingers traced the torn edges of the pages. Something in Malik's expression as he watched Ethan caught James's attention, a flash of pain quickly masked. There was more to this man than his ragged appearance suggested. "How do you know my name?" James asked, his lawyer's instincts kicking in. Malik's smile held no warmth. "You don't remember me, do you?" "But then I was wearing a suit the last time we met." He turned to leave, pausing only to address Ethan. "Stay strong, young artist. The world needs your vision." As Malik walked away, snow swirling around his retreating figure, James felt an uncomfortable stirring of memory. Something about the man's bearing, his educated speech. "Dad," Ethan tugged at his sleeve. "Can we help him? He looks so cold." James glanced down at his son, surprised by the intensity in his usually quiet voice. "It's complicated, Ethan. People like that, they often have problems we can't solve." "You solve problems all the time," Ethan persisted. "That's what you tell me. Why is this different?" The question hung in the frigid air, challenging James's carefully constructed worldview. In the distance, Malik disappeared around a corner, leaving only footprints in the fresh snow and questions that would haunt James through the sleepless night ahead. Hey, amazing viewers! If this story has touched your heart so far, take a second to tap that like button glowing on your screen. That one simple click means everything to us and helps share this powerful message of hope and redemption with others. Let's spread the love together. Rick's auto shop glowed like a beacon in the pre-dawn darkness. James stood in the office watching snow fall through the window while Rick reviewed Malik's old engineering credentials that James had managed to uncover. "An engineer, huh?" Rick scratched his beard thoughtfully. "Quite a fall from grace." "Everyone deserves a second chance," James heard himself say, surprising even himself. The words felt foreign in his mouth. He'd built his career arguing the opposite in courtrooms. The bell above the door chimed. Malik entered, snow dusting his shoulders, wearing the same worn coat but freshly washed. His eyes widened slightly at seeing James there. "Mr. Thompson," Rick stood, extending his hand. "James tells me you know your way around engines." "I used to design them," Malik replied quietly, his handshake firm despite his obvious nervousness. Before doesn't matter here," Rick interrupted. "What matters is now. Can you fix cars?" "Yes, sir. I've been maintaining vehicles at the shelter when I can. Helps keep people mobile for job searches." Rick nodded, impressed by the practical application of skills. "Show me." They moved to the workshop where a dismantled engine lay spread across a workbench. Rick gestured toward it. "Tell me what you see." James watched as Malik's entire demeanor transformed. His shoulders straightened, his eyes lit up with professional interest. For a moment, the homeless man disappeared, replaced by the engineer he once was. Twin-cam engine, likely from a 2015 Toyota Malik, began, hands hovering over the parts. The timing belt's worn, and there's scoring on the cylinder walls. The head gasket's blown, which explains the coolant leak. But the real problem. He reached deep into the engine's heart, fingers finding a nearly invisible crack. Is here. Metal fatigue. You'll need to replace the entire block. Rick whistled softly. Been trying to diagnose that for 2 days. You got all that just by looking. Engineering isn't just about building new things, Malik replied. It's about understanding how things fail and how to fix them. The double meaning wasn't lost on James. He thought of Ethan's drawings, still carrying the tears from the bullies. Some damage couldn't be seen at first glance. When can you start? Rick asked. Malik's composure faltered. Sir, I should be honest. I don't have a permanent address. No phone. And my record. Got a solution for that? James stepped forward. There's an apartment above my garage. Basic but warm. It's yours if you want it. Part of the job. Silence filled the workshop. Malik stared at James, searching for the catch, the hidden agenda. Why? Because my son sees something in you that I'm starting to see too, James admitted. And because I'm tired of being part of the problem. Outside, the snow fell heavier, but inside the garage, something shifted like a gear finally clicking into place. Rick clapped his hands together. Well, that's settled then. Start Monday. As they left the shop, Malik paused in the doorway. Mr. West, thank you. But there's something you should know about who I am. James raised a hand to stop him. The past is the past. What matters is what we do now. If only he knew how those words would come back to haunt him. As they parted ways in the swirling snow, neither man noticed the black sedan parked across the street, its windows tinted, its occupant watching with keen interest as the former engineer and the prosecutor who destroyed his life walked away in opposite directions. That evening, James sat in his study, a glass of whiskey untouched before him. Spread across his desk were newspaper clippings from 10 years ago, the Thompson engineering scandal. His fingers traced the headlines he'd long tried to forget. Dad, Ethan, stood in the doorway, clutching his sketchbook. Can I show you something? James quickly gathered the clippings, but not before Ethan caught sight of a photo. That's Malik, he said, pointing to the decade-old image of a man in a suit standing proudly in front of a building. How did you know? James asked, startled. Ethan opened his sketchbook to a page he'd been working on. It showed Malik, but not as he appeared now. The drawing captured him as he once was, standing tall, confident beside a woman and a young girl. The detail was extraordinary. He told me about them, Ethan said softly, when he was helping me pick up my drawings. Sarah and Maya, they died in the snow like Mom. James felt his chest tighten. He picked up the old case file, the one he'd pulled from storage after recognizing Malik. The accident report was there: Sarah and Maya Thompson killed on Westbrook Bridge during a snowstorm. The same bridge where, 2 years ago, a knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Through the frosted glass, he recognized Rick's silhouette. The garage owner's face was grave when James let him in. You need to see this, Rick said, holding out a worn leather wallet. Found it when Malik was changing into his work clothes. Thought he should have a proper locker. Inside was a newspaper clipping, yellow with age. It wasn't about the engineering scandal or Malik's conviction. It was a small article, easily missed: unknown Samaritan attempts rescue at fatal bridge accident. James read the date: 2 years ago, the night his wife died. There's more, Rick said quietly. Security footage from that night. Never released to the public. Shows a man matching Malik's description trying to save the driver. He nearly died himself, got pulled under trying to reach her. James sank into his chair, the weight of understanding crushing him. He was there. He tried to save her. And now he's watching over your son, Rick added, even after everything that happened with the trial. Ethan, who had been quietly drawing, spoke up. Is that why he's always at the park? To protect people. James looked at his son's latest sketch. It showed Malik standing guard in the snow, a solitary figure bearing witness to both tragedy and hope. The artist's insight cut straight to a truth James had been blind to. "I need to make this right," James whispered. "Be careful," Rick warned. "Just got word some people from your old firm have been asking questions about Malik. They're not happy about his reappearance." James's jaw tightened. Of course they weren't. If the truth about the Thompson case came out, if Malik was innocent. "Dad," Ethan's voice pulled him back. "Are we going to help Malik?" Looking at his son, James saw not just the quiet, autistic boy the world sometimes overlooked, but a soul wise enough to see past surfaces to the truth beneath, like Malik had. "Yes," he said firmly, "we are. But first I need to tell you both a story about a mistake I made and why sometimes doing the right thing means admitting you were wrong." Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the city in a blank white sheet, as if offering a clean slate for redemption. The first few weeks at Rick's auto shop transformed Malik in subtle but profound ways. His shoulders straightened, his hands remembered their old confidence, and occasionally a ghost of his former smile would appear. The other mechanics, initially wary, came to respect his expertise and quiet dignity. Ethan started spending afternoons at the shop after school, perched on a workbench with his sketchbook. The garage became his sanctuary, filled with the comforting sounds of tools and engines, and Malik's patient explanations of how things worked. "See this engine," Malik would say, pointing to various parts. "It's like a symphony. Every piece has its purpose, its rhythm. When something's wrong, you just need to listen carefully." Ethan absorbed everything, translating mechanical concepts into art. His drawings evolved, combining machines and emotions in ways that startled his art teacher. One particular piece showed Malik's hands repairing a broken heart made of gears and pistons. James watched this bond develop with mixed emotions. Relief at seeing Ethan emerge from his shell ward with growing unease about the past. Each evening he added to a private file documenting inconsistencies in the old Thompson case. One snowy evening, Malik was closing up the shop when he found an old photograph that had fallen from Ethan's sketchbook. It showed Ethan's mother standing on Westbrook Bridge, laughing in the snow. His hands trembled as he picked it up. "You can keep it," Ethan's voice came from behind him. "I have others." Malik turned, careful to keep his expression neutral. "Your mother was beautiful." "You were there, weren't you?" Ethan asked quietly. "The night she died. Dad found out." Malik sat heavily on a nearby stool. "Yes, I was under the bridge that night. I heard the crash, saw the car go over. His voice cracked. I couldn't reach her in time. Like Sarah and Maya." Yes, Malik's whisper was barely audible. "Like Sarah and Maya." Ethan moved closer, his small hand finding Malik's. "That's why you watch the bridge now. And the park. You're trying to save everyone else." The profound understanding in the boy's voice broke something in Malik. A tear rolled down his weathered cheek. Sometimes we can't save the ones we love, but maybe we can save others." Neither noticed James standing in the doorway witnessing this exchange. He slipped away silently, his heart heavy with the weight of past judgments and present truths. The community's reaction to Malik's presence at the shop was a study in contrasts. Some customers, recognizing him from his engineering days, spread whispers about his fall from grace. Others, seeing his skill and dedication, became fierce advocates. But Mrs. Chin, whose ancient Toyota had baffled other mechanics, brought homemade dumplings after Malik fixed it. "My grandson was in that building you designed," she told him. "The one downtown, still standing strong like you." But not everyone was supportive. Anonymous calls complained about a criminal working in the neighborhood. Some clients transferred their business elsewhere. Rick stood firm, but the pressure was building. One morning they found graffiti on the shop's wall, "No criminals here." Rick painted over it without comment. The next day, new graffiti appeared, "Justice for Thompson." The last one made Malik pause. "Someone remembers," he murmured. "More than you know," James said, joining him at the wall. "The truth has a way of surfacing like oil in water." Their eyes met, decades of history hanging between them. Malik looked away first. "Some truths are better left buried, Mr. West, for everyone's sake." But James couldn't let it go. That evening, he received a visit from his old colleague, District Attorney Peterson. The conversation was brief but ominous. "Drop it," James Peterson warned. "That case is closed. Stirring it up now won't help anyone." "It'll help the truth," James countered. "The truth?" Peterson laughed coldly. "The truth is your son's getting attached to a convicted felon. How's that going to look in your custody hearing?" The threat was clear. James thought of Ethan, of the progress he'd made since Malik entered their lives, of the light returning to his eyes. That night, watching Ethan sleep, James made a decision. The next morning, he began making calls to old contacts, requesting sealed records, following paper trails that had gone cold a decade ago. Meanwhile, Malik taught Ethan how to change oil, check tire pressure, and recognize the subtle sounds of an engine in distress. More importantly, he taught him about resilience, about getting up when life knocks you down. "Everything can be fixed," Malik would say, "if you have the right tools and enough patience." Ethan took these lessons to heart, applying them beyond the garage. When he saw other kids being bullied, he intervened, not with force but with quiet determination, like Malik had done for him. As winter deepened, the bonds between them strengthened. But dark clouds were gathering. The past, like the winter storm brewing offshore, was about to break over them all. The storm broke first in the form of an anonymous envelope delivered to the local newspaper. Inside were documents suggesting the Thompson engineering scandal had been a cover-up. The morning headline read, "Decade-old fraud case, new questions emerge." James found Malik staring at the newspaper in Rick's office, his face ashen. "Did you do this?" Malik asked quietly. "No," James replied, though he'd been building a similar case. "But I think I know who did. Someone's trying to force our hand." Rick burst in, phone in hand. "They're coming. Board of Engineering inspectors claiming they need to review all our work. Someone filed a complaint about unlicensed engineering practices." The inspection was thorough and hostile. They questioned every repair Malik had overseen, scrutinized every signature. Though they found nothing improper, the message was clear: Malik was being watched. That evening, as snow began falling again, Ethan overheard a conversation that chilled him more than the winter wind. "You need to back off," Wes Peterson's voice carried from James's study. "Thompson's past needs to stay buried. Think about your son." "Are you threatening my family?" James's voice was dangerously quiet. "I'm reminding you what's at stake. That custody hearing is coming up. His mother's family would love to prove you're an unfit father." Ethan's hands shook as he sketched the scene, dark figures looming over his father, shadows with teeth. When Malik found him later, tears stained the drawing. "They want to take me away," Ethan whispered. "Because of you. Because Dad's trying to help you." Malik felt the familiar weight of guilt crushing his chest. "I would never let that happen, Ethan. Never." But the pressure continued mounting. Anonymous complaints flooded the shop. Clients were warned about liability issues. Rick's insurance company threatened to cancel their coverage. The final blow came when James discovered who had really embezzled the funds a decade ago. The evidence led straight to Peterson and several prominent members of his old firm. They had used Thompson Engineering as a front, knowing Malik's reputation for integrity would deflect suspicion. The night James confronted Peterson with this information, he returned home to find his office ransacked. Among the scattered papers lay one of Ethan's drawings, the one showing Malik trying to save his wife on the bridge with a red X drawn through it. "They're not just threatening me anymore," James told Malik at the shop the next day. "They're threatening you and Ethan. We need to end this." Malik's response surprised him. "No, we need to finish it. The right way this time." Together, they began gathering evidence, building a case that would expose the truth. Rick provided old maintenance records proving tampering with Malik's designs. Mrs. Chin's grandson, now an architectural student, analyzed the original building plans. But their enemies were watching. Strange cars parked outside the shop. Phones began clicking during calls. Ethan reported men in suits watching him at school. The tension reached its peak when Malik discovered his small apartment above the garage had been broken into. His journal, containing years of observations and memories, was gone. But they'd left something in its place, a newspaper clipping about Sarah and Maya's accident, with a handwritten note: "Accidents happen in winter." That night, Malik made a decision. James found his apartment empty the next morning with only a note: "I can't risk any more families being destroyed because of me. Take care of Ethan. He sees the truth in all of us." Ethan was devastated. His drawings turned dark, empty streets, abandoned tools, lonely figures in snowstorms. The garage felt hollow without Malik's presence. But James wasn't ready to give up. The evidence they'd gathered pointed to something bigger than one fraudulent case. It suggested a pattern of corruption reaching into the highest levels of the city's development projects. "We need to find him," Ethan insisted, showing his father a new drawing. It showed Malik at Westbrook Bridge, the same place where he'd tried to save their loved ones. "He'll go where it all started." As if nature herself understood the gravity of the moment, the Weather Service announced the approach of the worst winter storm in decades. The same conditions that had claimed Sarah and Maya, that had taken Ethan's mother, were about to return. James looked at his son's drawing, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You're right. But we're not the only ones who'll figure that out." They had to reach Malik before their enemies did. But as they prepared to leave, the storm already beginning to howl outside, James received one final warning from Peterson. "Stay home tonight, West. Some stories don't have happy endings." The storm hit with apocalyptic fury. Wind-driven snow reduced visibility to mere feet, and temperatures plummeted to dangerous levels. Emergency services were advising all residents to stay indoors, but three figures battled through the maelstrom toward Westbrook Bridge. James clutched Ethan's hand as they struggled through waist-deep drifts. Despite James's protests, Ethan had refused to stay home. "Malik never abandoned me," he'd said with quiet determination. "I won't abandon him." They spotted Malik's figure on the bridge through brief breaks in the whiteout conditions. He stood at the exact spot where both tragedies had occurred, his coat whipping in the violent wind. But they weren't alone. Two black SUVs were parked at the bridge's entrance, their headlights cutting through the swirling snow. Peterson emerged from one, accompanied by men whose stances suggested concealed weapons. "Last chance," Wes Peterson's voice barely carried over the howling wind. "Take your boy and go home." Ethan suddenly broke free from his father's grip, running toward Malik. "Look out," he screamed. Time seemed to slow. Multiple events unfolded simultaneously. Peterson's men moved toward Malik. James sprinted after Ethan. A patch of black ice caught Ethan's foot. The bridge's barrier, weakened by years of exposure, gave way under Ethan's weight. The next few seconds were chaos. Ethan disappeared over the edge with a terrified cry. Without hesitation, Malik dove after him. James reached the broken barrier, heart-stopping as he watched two figures plunge toward the icy river below. But Malik had been preparing for this moment for 10 years. In mid-fall, he managed to grab both Ethan and a maintenance cable that hung beneath the bridge. They dangled precariously above the churning water, Malik holding Ethan with one arm while his other hand gripped the frozen cable. The same position he'd been in years ago with Sarah and Maya, with Ethan's mother. But this time would be different. "Hold on," Malik's voice was strained. "I've got you." James lay flat on the bridge deck, reaching down, but they were too far below. Peterson and his men stood frozen, their threatening demeanor replaced by genuine horror. "The cable won't hold both of you," James shouted against the wind. Malik knew this. He could feel the metal strands beginning to unravel. But he also knew something else: the river's current had changed since the last accidents. The underwater support pillar that had claimed the previous victims had been eroded away. Ethan and Malik spoke calmly, despite their desperate situation. "Remember what I taught you about trust, about having faith in things you can't see?" Ethan nodded, his face pale but trusting. "When I say now, let go. The current will carry you to the shore. Your father will meet you there." "No," James screamed, understanding Malik's plan. "There has to be another way." But Malik had made his choice. This time he would save the child. This time redemption was possible. Now. Ethan released his grip. The bitter wind carried his father's anguished cry as he disappeared into the swirling snow and darkness below. Malik, freed from the extra weight, began pulling himself up the cable. James ran for the shoreline, his heart pounding. Peterson's men followed their flashlight beams, searching the turbulent water. For endless seconds, there was nothing but the storm's fury. Then a small hand broke the surface downstream, exactly where Malik had predicted. Ethan was quickly pulled to safety, cold but alive. "Dad," Ethan coughed out river water. Malik knew. He knew the river would save me. But when they looked back to the bridge, Malik was gone. The cable hung empty, swaying in the wind. Peterson approached, his face ashen. "West, we never meant for this." "Find him," James's voice cracked with emotion. "He saved my son. Help me find him." The storm raged on as search parties formed. Emergency vehicles arrived, their lights painting the snow in alternating red and blue. Ethan, wrapped in blankets, refused to leave, his eyes fixed on the river. "He's alive," Ethan insisted, pulling out his sketchbook, somehow still dry inside his waterproof backpack. He showed them his latest drawing, Malik emerging from the storm, walking toward a bright future. "He has to be." The search continued through the night, with rescue teams battling hypothermic conditions. James and Ethan remained at the scene, huddled in an emergency vehicle, while Peterson's men scoured both riverbanks. The storm gradually began to ease, but temperature continued to drop dangerously. A shout cut through the diminishing wind. "Tracks in the snow leading under the bridge." James's heart leaped. The area under Westbrook Bridge, Malik's old shelter, where he'd spent years keeping vigil. Of course he would know every handhold, every hidden path. "Stay here," he told Ethan, but his son grabbed his arm. "No, we go together. Family stays together. That's what Malik taught me." The descent to the underbridge area was treacherous. Ice coated every surface, and the wind still howled through the structural beams. Emergency workers illuminated the space with powerful floodlights, revealing a small encampment. There they found evidence of Malik's long vigil engineering textbooks protected in waterproof containers, sketches of bridge reinforcement designs, and a wall of newspaper clippings about both accidents. But no Malik. But Malik. Then Ethan spotted something, a fresh notebook carefully placed on a dry ledge. Inside was a letter. "Dear James and Ethan, if you're reading this, I've either succeeded or failed in my final act of redemption. For 10 years I've studied this bridge, the currents, the structural weaknesses. I knew someday history would repeat itself, and I had to be ready. James, I forgave you long ago. Your pursuit of justice, though misguided, came from a place of principle. The real criminals were those who used us both. Ethan, you saw me when others looked away. Your art shows the world not just as it is, but as it could be. Keep drawing, keep seeing the truth in people. The evidence you need is hidden in my old office at Thompson Engineering. Behind the third ceiling tile from the window, you'll find everything Peterson and his associates tried to bury. The password to the safe is Maya's birthday. Whatever happens, remember, sometimes the greatest engineering feat isn't building something new, but repairing what's broken, whether it's a bridge, a life, or a family. Malik, As James finished reading, another shout rang out. Down by the river's edge, illuminated by searchlights, a figure lay half submerged in the icy water. The next few minutes were chaos. Rescue workers rushed to pull Malik's unconscious form from the river. His body temperature was dangerously low, but they found a pulse weak but present. "He's alive," the call went up, echoing under the bridge. Peterson approached as paramedics worked to stabilize Malik. His face showed a conflict of emotions. "West," he said quietly, "if he survives, there are things we need to discuss about the past." James turned to him, anger and triumph mixing in his voice. "No discussion needed. The evidence is already being recovered. Your choice now is simple: help make this right, or go down with the others." Ethan had pulled out his sketchbook again, drawing frantically as Malik was loaded into an ambulance. The scene captured the moment perfectly: Malik surrounded by light, being pulled back from darkness, while shadows fled from the bridge's edges. "He'll make it," Ethan said with certainty. "He has to. Our story isn't finished." As the ambulance sped away, its siren cutting through the last remnants of the storm, James looked at his son with new understanding. Ethan's autism hadn't been a barrier to emotional insight, it had been a lens that allowed him to see truth others missed. The breaking dawn painted the snow-covered city in shades of hope, but the night's events had set in motion changes that would reshape more than just their lives. The bridge that had been a symbol of tragedy was about to become something else, a bridge to truth, to justice, and to redemption. Hey, beautiful souls. As this story unfolds, I'd love to have you join our growing family of storytellers. Your subscription means we can keep sharing these powerful stories of hope and redemption. Click that subscribe button to be part of something truly meaningful. Thank you for being here. The hospital waiting room became their new vigil. Malik lay in intensive care, his body temperature dangerously low, machines beeping a fragile rhythm of survival. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, but complications kept arising. His body's been through years of exposure, Dr. Chen explained gently. The chronic cold, malnutrition, stress, it's all catching up now. The next 48 hours are critical. Ethan set up a small art station in the corner of the waiting room, his drawings now focused on healing and hope. Other patients' families began stopping to look, drawn to the story told through a child's eyes. The media descended like wolves. Homeless hero's tragic past screamed one headline. Disgraced engineer saves boy from bridge declared another. James tried to shield Ethan from the circus, but his son's quiet voice cut through the chaos. They're still not seeing him, Ethan observed, working on a new sketch. They see the story, but not the person. The real blow came 3 days after the rescue. Peterson arrived at the hospital, his face grave. The evidence in Malik's office, someone got there first. Everything's gone. James felt the weight of defeat pressing down. Without that evidence, proving the original conspiracy would be nearly impossible. Malik's sacrifice might end up changing nothing. Then Ethan tugged at his sleeve. Dad, remember what Malik always says about broken things. That everything can be fixed with the right tools, James replied automatically. No, Ethan shook his head. That sometimes you have to let something break completely before you can rebuild it properly. As if in response to these words, the monitors in Malik's room began screaming. Medical staff rushed in as Malik's heart rate plummeted. Through the window, James and Ethan watched in horror as doctors fought to stabilize him. Clear the sound of the defibrillator was followed by the sickening thud of electricity meeting flesh. Ethan pressed his face against the glass, his small hand leaving prints on the cold surface. He was drawing in the condensation with his finger, a heart made of gears and pistons, like the one he'd sketched in the garage so long ago. The doctors worked frantically, but Malik's body, worn down by years of hardship, was fighting its own battle. Each heartbeat seemed to cost him more than the last. Outside the hospital, snow began falling again, gentle this time, as if nature itself was holding its breath. The same snow that had taken Sarah and Maya, that had almost claimed Ethan's mother, that had brought them all together, now returned to witness this moment. In the waiting room, Ethan continued drawing, his artistry becoming more urgent, more intense. Each sketch showed Malik growing stronger, the machines quieting, life returning. But sometimes art can't change reality. Sometimes the broken pieces are too scattered to rebuild. The doctors managed to stabilize Malik, but he remained in a coma. During those quiet hours, as machines breathed for him, the truth began to emerge in unexpected ways. A young nurse recognized Malik from years ago. He designed the children's hospital wing, she told James, the one that survived the earthquake last year. His designs saved hundreds of lives that day. More people came forward. A maintenance worker remembered Malik spending nights under the bridge, sketching reinforcement plans. He kept warning them about the barrier's weakness. Nobody listened. Then came the devastating revelation. Among Malik's recovered belongings was a waterproof case containing a USB drive. On it they found video footage from the night of Ethan's mother's accident. James watched, hands trembling, as the scene unfolded. Malik had indeed tried to save her, but there was more. The video showed another car leaving the scene. The license plate was clear it belonged to Peterson. He was following her, James whispered, the pieces finally falling into place. She must have discovered something about the fraud. Ethan, who'd insisted on staying at the hospital, looked up from his latest drawing. That's why Malik never left the bridge. He was waiting for proof. The truth hit James like a physical blow. His wife's death hadn't been an accident. And Malik, the man he'd wrongly convicted, who'd lost everything, had spent years gathering evidence to prove it. In Malik's hospital room, monitors continued their steady rhythm. His face, peaceful in unconsciousness, showed no sign of the decades of burden he'd carried. "I prosecuted an innocent man," James confessed to his sleeping form. "Then he saved my son, and he was trying to save her too." Ethan placed his latest drawing on Malik's bedside table. It showed 3 scenes: the past tragedy, the present moment, and a future yet to be written. "He's not given up," Ethan said firmly. "See? His heart's still beating in gears and pistons." But fate had one more cruel twist. As James studied the USB drive's contents, he discovered something that broke his heart anew. Maya, Malik's daughter, had left a voicemail the night she died. "Daddy, we found the papers Mr. Peterson hid. We're bringing them to prove you're innocent. We'll be there soon." They never arrived. The storm had taken them before they could deliver the evidence that would have freed their father. Now, 10 years later, Malik lay fighting for his life, having sacrificed everything twice over, first for truth, then for redemption. Outside the hospital window, snow continued falling, each flake carrying the weight of secrets finally revealed. The city lights flickered through the storm, casting shadows that danced like memories across Malik's still form. The evidence on the USB drive ignited a firestorm. Local media outlets received anonymous copies of the files, making suppression impossible. Peterson's carefully constructed world began crumbling. James, fueled by rage and guilt, threw himself into building a new case. His office became a war room, walls covered with timelines and connections. Each thread led back to that fateful engineering project. Each document revealed deeper layers of corruption. "You're making powerful enemies," Rick warned, visiting the hospital with coffee and concerns. "They're saying things about your fitness as a father again." "Let 'em," James replied, his voice steel. "Sometimes doing the right thing means losing everything. Malik taught me that." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Chen's grandson, now working at Thompson Engineering, discovered old server backups. They deleted the files, he explained, but forgot about the cloud archives. The evidence was damning. Years of falsified reports, manipulated safety data, millions in embezzled funds. And something worse, proof that Peterson had orchestrated both fatal accidents to silence potential whistleblowers. James presented everything to the district attorney's office, but met resistance. "It's too old," they claimed. "Too complicated for a jury." Then Ethan had an idea. During a hospital visit, he showed his father his latest sketchbook. "People understand pictures better than words," he said. The drawings told the story with devastating clarity: the original fraud, the cover-up, the deaths, the years of silent vigilance, and finally redemption through sacrifice. Each image captured what thousands of words couldn't. James adapted this approach for the grand jury presentation. Alongside technical evidence, he showed Ethan's artwork, letting the human cost of corruption become visible. The indictments came down like thunderbolts. Peterson, board members, city officials. Each arrest made headlines, each revelation shook the city's foundations. But the victory felt hollow. Malik remained unresponsive, his machines beeping in unchanged rhythm. The doctors spoke of brain damage from oxygen deprivation, of systems slowly failing. "He needs to see this," Ethan insisted, taping his latest drawings around the hospital room. "He needs to know it wasn't for nothing." The legal battle intensified. Peterson's allies fought back with everything they had. James's past cases were scrutinized, his custody of Ethan questioned again. Then one morning, as snow fell outside Malik's hospital window, a nurse noticed something. His hand had moved, fingers tracing patterns on the sheet, engineering calculations, muscle memory from decades of design work. "He's still in there," Ethan said. "He's trying to fix things, even now." James looked at his son, then at the man who had lost everything yet given everything. The real battle, he realized, wasn't in the courtroom. It was here, in this quiet room, where a broken man fought to rebuild himself one more time. As Peterson and his associates faced justice in the courts, a different kind of resolution unfolded in Malik's hospital room. After weeks of unconsciousness, he began showing signs of awareness. His fingers would move in response to Ethan's voice, especially when the boy read engineering texts aloud. The brain's pathways are rewiring, Dr. Chen explained. He's finding new routes to consciousness, like water finding its way around obstacles. Then came the morning that changed everything. James arrived to find Ethan unusually excited. "Look at his latest numbers," he said, pointing to the patterns Malik had traced. "They're not random calculations." James studied the figures. His legal training kicked in, recognizing a pattern. "These are dates," he whispered, "and coordinates." Together, they decoded Malik's message. The numbers led them to an old storage unit, paid for anonymously for the past decade. Inside, they found what the USB drive had only hinted at: the complete original evidence from both accidents, preserved and protected. He never stopped gathering proof, James realized. Even homeless, he kept fighting. That afternoon, Malik opened his eyes for the first time in weeks. His first clear words were, "Did you find it?" "Yes," James replied, tears threatening. "You did it, Malik. Peterson's going to prison. They all are." Malik's weak smile held decades of relief. Maya would have liked that. She always believed in justice. But the most profound moment came when Ethan showed Malik his latest drawing. It depicted not the past tragedies or present triumph, but a future Malik teaching engineering to young students, James advocating for the wrongly accused, Ethan's art hanging in galleries. "Is that how you see us?" Malik asked softly. "That's who we are," Ethan replied with simple certainty. "Family finds a way, like water around obstacles." The transformation wasn't just personal. As Malik's story spread, the city began to change. The homeless shelter where he'd spent years received anonymous donations. Engineering firms revised their whistleblower policies. Art therapy programs sprang up in rehabilitation centers. James formally filed to clear Malik's name, but that seemed almost secondary now. The real healing happened in quiet moments: Malik helping Ethan with math homework from his hospital bed, James bringing cases for Malik to review, the three of them planning for a future none had dared imagine. "You know what's ironic?" Malik said one evening, watching snow fall outside his window. "I spent years trying to rebuild my old life. Never realized I was building a new one all along." Ethan, drawing beside him, looked up. "That's what you taught me about broken things, remember? Sometimes they come back stronger in different ways." Outside, the city glittered under fresh snow, its shadows and secrets exposed to light, its foundations strengthened not by steel and concrete, but by truth and redemption. Spring arrived, melting away the last traces of winter. Malik left the hospital on a bright March morning, supported by James and Ethan. The media gathered outside, but for once their presence felt celebratory rather than invasive. His first request wasn't to visit his old office or the courthouse where his name had been cleared. Instead, he asked to go to Westbrook Bridge. "Are you sure?" James asked, understanding the weight of memories that place carried. "Some places need to be revisited," Malik replied, "to be transformed." They stood together at the spot where so much had been lost and found. The bridge's barrier had been replaced, built according to Malik's original safety specifications. A small plaque commemorated the lives lost and saved there. Ethan pulled out his sketchbook, but instead of drawing, he removed 3 pages. The first showed Sarah and Maya, the second showed Ethan's mother, and the third depicted the night of Ethan's rescue. "We should let them go," he said quietly. "Like you taught me about moving forward." Malik nodded, tears in his eyes. Together they released the drawings into the spring breeze. The papers caught the wind, dancing like white birds before disappearing into the bright sky. Later that day, they visited Rick's auto shop, where a surprise awaited. The garage had been transformed. A new sign read Thompson West Engineering and Automotive Training Center. The community raised the funds, Rick explained, grinning. "We're going to teach engineering and mechanics to at-risk youth. Already got a waiting list." Inside, the walls displayed Ethan's artwork alongside technical diagrams. The workbenches were filled with young people learning to rebuild engines and lives. "This is Maya's birthday gift," Malik realized, recognizing the date. A chance to teach others what she never got to learn. James placed a hand on his shoulder. It's also a fresh start for all of us. The center became their new beginning. Malik's engineering expertise combined with James's legal advocacy and Ethan's artistic vision created something unique, a place where broken things and broken people could find restoration. Peterson's trial was set for summer, but that seemed less important now. The real victory wasn't in punishment, but in transformation. The evidence Malik had gathered over years served a greater purpose, changing laws to protect whistleblowers and ensure engineering safety standards. One evening, as they closed up the center, Ethan revealed his latest drawing. It showed the three of them at a workbench, teaching a group of students. But in the background, transparent like guardian angels, stood Sarah, Maya, and Ethan's mother, watching over them with proud smiles. "They're still with us," Ethan said, "in everything we build." Malik studied the image, then looked at the thriving community they'd created. "Yes," he agreed, "in everything we rebuild." Christmas Eve arrived with gentle snowfall, so different from the storms that had marked their past. The Thompson West Center was alive with light and laughter, hosting its first holiday celebration for the community. Former homeless individuals, now trained mechanics and engineers, mingled with business leaders and city officials. Children from the youth program proudly demonstrated their projects. Among them was a scale model of a redesigned Westbrook Bridge, incorporating all of Malik's safety features. "See how the support structure distributes weight," a young girl explained to visitors, echoing Malik's teaching style. "It's like a family, each part supports the others." In the center's office, now decorated with both Christmas ornaments and engineering awards, James found Malik looking through a special album. Ethan had compiled it, combining newspaper clippings of their journey with his artwork. 10 years on the streets, Malik mused, and now this. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm dreaming." "If you are," James replied, "we all are. And maybe that's what hope is, a shared dream of something better." Ethan burst in, excited. They're ready for the ceremony. Outside, the community gathered as Malik unveiled a new sculpture, a collaborative piece designed by the center students. It showed 3 figures emerging from metallic waves, reaching toward a star. The plaque read, "For those who fell, those who rose, and those who help others rise." Mrs. Chin, now a regular volunteer, wiped tears from her eyes. "My grandson starts engineering school next month," she told Malik. "Because of you, he believes in second chances." As evening fell, the three of them walked to Westbrook Bridge. The structure, once a symbol of tragedy, now shone with Christmas lights. Each bulb had been placed by someone whose life had been touched by their story. Ethan took out his latest sketchbook. The first page showed their past, the darkness, the loss, the cold. But with each turn of the page, light grew. The final drawing showed not just their family, but a whole community transformed. "You know what I've learned," Ethan said, his voice carrying the wisdom that had always seen truth clearly. "Sometimes the strongest bridges aren't made of steel and concrete. They're made of forgiveness and hope." Malik looked at James, then at Ethan. A decade ago, he'd lost one family to this bridge of shadows. Now, beneath its Christmas lights, he'd found another. "Merry Christmas," he said softly, embracing them both. Above them, the snow continued falling, each flake catching the light like tiny stars. On the bridge that had nearly claimed 3 lives, 3 hearts now beat in harmony. And in the distance, the center's lights glowed like a beacon, promising warmth and hope to all who sought it. The story didn't end, it transformed, like winter into spring, like broken things rebuilt stronger, like justice tempered with mercy. And somewhere in the eternal dance of snow and starlight, 3 spirits smiled upon the family they'd helped create. Dear beautiful souls, thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of redemption and hope. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to support our storytelling family. Hit that subscribe button to never miss our upcoming stories. Press like if you felt the magic. Share your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. Spread the love by sharing this video with family and friends. Your support means everything to us and helps us continue creating these meaningful stories that connect hearts across the world. Together we can inspire hope and change through the power of storytelling. Thank you for being part of our growing family.